You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious but concerned episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers outlast Army 72-64 to move to 2-0 on the season. But it is the second straight performance by Indiana, against a team that Indiana was supposed to handle, certainly this one more than Florida Gulf Coast, that Indiana was supposed to handle with ease, that just didn't happen. And that really presents a lot of questions that we are going to try and tackle on this edition of the Assembly Call. Obviously, happy to get the win. You avert disaster by winning this game and not having a loss against the 338th ranked team against KenPom on your resume. But just really an unfocused, uneven performance by Indiana. Look, we knew this was going to be a season where it was going to take this team some time. There were going to be some growing pains early. Not sure everybody saw an 8-point win over Army as being part of that. And so we're going to try and make sense of it all here on this edition of the Assembly Call. I'm your host, Jared Morris, here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. The coach, Brian Tonsoni, is not here. It is his birthday, so go wish the coach a happy birthday. And certainly we're going to make him come talk about this game on his birthday. But anyway, let's start this show the way that we start every show, and that is with our banner moment. And it wasn't a performance that provided a lot of highlights for Indiana, but to me, when I'm thinking about the banner moment, it's at the 9:51 mark of the second half when Xavier Johnson came back into the game. The biggest thing that you want to do in a game like this, really the two biggest things, like just the fundamental things you have to get out of a game like this with, are the win. Indiana did that, and no major injuries. And so with X coming back into that game, it looked like maybe it was just some cramping. Indiana certainly did that, and it was a really kind of interesting up and down game for X. In the first half, he scored 15 points, had 3 assists, and really was about the only thing going offensively. And if he doesn't, kind of go off and take it upon himself to be a bit of a one-man offensive show, who knows what the first half deficit would have been for Indiana. Didn't have as productive of a second half, and his defense was up and down all night, but certainly that play that he made on the first possession after coming back in, the little two-man action with Peyton Sparks. Sparks had a nice little roll. X hit him with the little pocket pass, and then Sparks hit that tough up and under. It put Indiana up 56-50. So, there were some highlights, especially in the first half. A lot of those highlights were from Xavier Johnson. But on a night like tonight, we're going to break down a lot of the things that happened in this game. But you just got to escape with the win. Indiana did that, and you got to escape without any major injuries, for this game to not be a complete disaster. And so with X coming back, Indiana certainly did that. And that's about as good of a banner moment as I've got after what was a very frustrating and perplexing performance by the Hoosiers this evening. All right, with that said, let's talk about our presenting sponsor. Yes, our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, now in their 7th season sponsoring the Assembly Call, and their 3rd as the presenting sponsor for the Back Home Network. As you know, Home Field has the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you will find anywhere, and since IU is their flagship school, you know that there's always going to be more new stuff coming out. And whenever they do something cool, like the snapback hats that they just brought out, Indiana's going to be one of the first schools to have them. Same thing with the bomber jackets. Indiana now has 2 of the bomber jackets, and so if there is an Indiana fan in your life that you're looking to shop for Christmas this year, go to homefieldapparel.com. You can use our promo code HOME23, and you will get 15% off your entire first order. And the thing is, it's not just Indiana. Their product line extends to well over 150 colleges and universities with unique apparel for each of them, because they pull these old logos and brand marks and mascots out of the dustbins of history, breathe new life into them. And it's a really fun way for fans of schools to show their love, and every item is really kind of a conversation starter. which is great, and that's what Home Field does. They've also got some Colts gear. They've got their core collection, so it's always growing. Even if you were there a month ago, there's new stuff there that you haven't seen now. So go there, support our friends at Home Field Apparel. Came up through the Kelly School of Business. We love supporting them. We really appreciate their support of us. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your entire first order. That's HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website, homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. Andy, we will start with you, your bottoms line on this Indiana performance.
I think I think growing pains is something that everybody expected with this team, but I don't think anybody expected what we've seen through the first couple games. And I don't think anybody necessarily should have expected it to be as bad as it was tonight, quite frankly. And I think some of it is philosophical that I know we'll get to in terms of some of the things defensively, and would be great for a coach to be on and help, kind of explain again the whole nail slot rim thing of trying to prevent drives. But there are drives that are not going to materialize that IU is helping off of and not recovering. And I almost said it on the broadcast at one point, IU is in constant rotation.
Yes.
And gave up countless wide open threes against a team that wanted to shoot threes. Coming into the game, a big part of, from an attempt standpoint, that was what Army wanted to do. 61 field goal attempts for them tonight. 38 of them were threes, and tons of them were just absolutely uncontested looks. And, you want to take the fact that this is new personnel. They're trying to learn the system. They're trying to learn how to play together, the communication, whatever else. But hell, you got a situation at the end of the game. You have two guys leave the guy with the ball. I just, like that to me is beyond even philosophical things. And this team just doesn't look like they're on the same page right now. Xavier Johnson, I turned off the post-game interview. People talked that he was really mad after the game. Well, good. But, said that Ware and Malik can be soft. I got to tell you, IU loses this game by 1 billion, if not for Khalil Ware's stretch in the beginning of the second half.
Wait, he said that on the post-game?
That's what multiple people in the Discord said it. So that I'm going off of that. I didn't.
I turned it off before the.
I didn't watch it because we were getting on here. But and then offensively, I really struggled to figure out what this team is trying to do. Again, we talked about this philosophically. I joked before we came on that if I could go back and re-lock one of our over-unders from earlier in the week, I would lock the hell out of the under 3-point attempts in this. I mean, they barely shot any in the second half. And while that's great that Malik and Khalil were effective inside, like, it's against Army. It just does not feel like a philosophy that is gonna get you there against other good teams. So trying to stay away from overreactions and hyperbole. I probably did not do a good job with that already, but like, this was an alarming performance to me on a variety of levels. Doesn't mean that this team isn't going to be good. Doesn't mean any of those things, but given the opponent and everything else, like, this was alarming to me. And for a lot of reasons. I think we could pass off the Florida Gulf Coast as, hey, this is the better team than people, may have given credit for coming into the game. Sure. And it was, hey, there's lots of angles to talk about here. Like, that's not true with Army coming in, and maybe IU overlooked them, but I'm not sure this team is at a point where it can be overlooking anybody quite yet. And just lots to work on, lots to figure out. The talent on this roster suggests that there's still a ceiling for this team that can be reached. And that's why I'm not by any stretch given up on them after 2 games. But the distance between where they are and where they've shown through these first couple games and what that ceiling is pretty vast right now.
Coach, let's go to you. It's Tonsoni time. What's on your mind?
They got problems.
They do. Thank you for chiming in with that, Coach. Ryan, let's go to you for your rant.
Look, there were narratives when Mike Woodson was hired as the head coach, and one of them, and it's been pointed out repeatedly, it was, could he recruit? He's never done it before. Could he recruit? And he's done a great job with that. The other question was, we know he'll teach intense defense, and his philosophy of defense is a lot of switching and things like that. And sometimes with new players, that takes a while because it's a lot of communication and understanding where each other are and feeling comfortable with each other. And so that, I think, you can kind of expect to be sloppy early in the season with 10 new players on the roster. I didn't expect it to be perfect. I didn't expect him to be leaving 3-point shooters open all day when they already have the ball. But I expected some sloppiness with younger guys and new guys. The other thing was, what will the offense look like? His teams typically relied on a lot of ISO in the NBA, relied on a lot of one pass or individual plays. And while some of his teams shot a lot of 3-pointers, a lot of that was individual plays. It wasn't a set offense getting those. Can he become teach modern basketball? And the answer so far has been a resounding no. And maybe it's not what he's teaching, it's what's happening on the court. All we heard all offseason was, well, the offense we ran last year was because of the players we had. We're going to be different. We're going to change it. It's going to be more open. It's going to be less focused on just feeding the post. Through 2 games and 2 exhibitions, I don't see it. They shot, as Andy said, 11 threes tonight?
11 threes. They
shot 3 in the second half. And one of them was a last second by Xavier Johnson where he had to shoot it. It got tipped and fell about a foot short of the rim. It was a shot clock violation, I believe. That's not good enough. And it's never going to be good enough in modern college basketball. What'd you lose by? 30? Army had 39 points from the 3-point line and Indiana had 12. If you do that against anybody else, you are getting blown the heck out. This team needs to shoot threes. It needs to stop focusing on only feeding the post. Look, if you have an advantage like you do against Army, yes, Khalil Ware in the post against Army is your win. But we haven't seen this in other games either. We haven't seen them moving the ball around the perimeter, using cutters to get open looks, kicking it in, kicking out. The one time they went kick in, kick out, they got a wide open 3 for Gabe Cupps from the corner and he knocked it down. It was probably the biggest shot of the game. They're not doing that enough. You're seeing a 3-out, 2-in offense where you've got 2 bigs taking up all the space in the lane, which closes the driving lanes and also leads the defense to believe they're not even going to shoot these out here, so let's pack the paint. And that's what they did. And it was only because Ware and Renew are so much better than their competition that they were able to combine for 34 points. So I don't know what it's going to take, but Mike Woodson needs to change what he's doing offensively and get his perimeter players involved. You're getting nothing from your shooters. You had Caleb Banks hit a 3. CJ Gunn, nothing. Trey Galloway, nothing. Xavier Johnson hit 2, and then Gabe Cupps hit 1. Like Khalil Ware is supposed to be an inside-out guy. He didn't even take a 3 tonight. Like, you've got to utilize the 3-point line or it goes to waste because you know what? Everybody else in college basketball is going to utilize the 3-point line. There will be games where they don't hit them, but on the whole, they will beat you if they can shoot.
It's a great point, and I think, look, if you're, kind of coming and watching this show and you're like, dude, they won by 8. Why are you guys so upset? The context here is really important. Indiana was supposed to win this game by 24, 25 points when you look at every computer metric because this Army team was 338th in KenPom. And so I think, our analysis tonight is not just, based on, hey, did they win the game? Yes, they won the game. But it's trying to project, what did we actually see tonight that when they go play Connecticut in the Empire Classic is actually going to translate? And I think part of the issue, Ryan, as you just said right there, Khalil, 20 points, 9 of 11 from the field, Malik with 14 points. Like, that's all great. But the concern is you come out in the second half and you're basically just desperately going into your big guys to beat
You have
Army.
To do it to win the game. Yeah.
Right. It shouldn't have been like that. And I think a big concern for me coming out of this, Andy, is, to me, when I was looking at this game, I was like, boy, this is a huge spot to get Mackenzie Mbako going. He's a freshman. This is a guy who's been used to scoring points. We know he's having, struggles on the defensive end. There's no question about it. But you're going to need his offense. Like, that's the formula for this team. One of the huge parts to reach its ceiling is you've got to get Mackenzie Mbako going. Mackenzie Mbako played 16 minutes, scored 2 points, had 1 play run for him, and made the shot when that play was run for him. And look, I can already hear what folks are saying. He's not playing well enough defensively to earn minutes on the court, yada, yada, all that stuff. But you have a supremely talented 5-star freshman who is essentially an afterthought in the offense right now. And, Ryan, to the point that you made earlier, with a guy like Miller Kopp, a fifth-year senior who knows what that role is going to be and really understands it, like, you can kind of do that, and he'll be patient waiting for his points. Mackenzie Mbako is a freshman,
Yeah.
You got to do some things to help him out. And so that, to me, is a concern that through 2 games, you haven't really been able to get that young man going offensively because him getting going offensively is going to help the defense. And so that's where last year when you hear quotes like, it's not my job to get Miller Kopp shots. Yeah, well, it is your job to help Mackenzie Mbako get shots, I think.
It is.
And so not seeing any of that to me is very frustrating. And, from the philosophical thing, from the, what do we take from tonight that we project forward? That's something to plant a red flag in. It's too early to press the panic button, of course, and Indiana's 2-0, but you got to get him going somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that way is, but.
And right now, you'd say maybe Khalil Ware is your most talented player physically, something like that, because he's tall and he can do some things and he can face up and all that. But Mackenzie Mbako is your most talented offensive weapon, I would say. And yes, he's a freshman, so caveats for that, and he's got to get comfortable at this level. But when your offense is floundering the way it was for a long stretch, where they have 5 turnovers in a row at one point of the second half, when the game was still in doubt,
18
and
total.
You can't find a possession to get him the ball and say, like, all right, clear out the wing, let him go one-on-one, or let's run a screen for him, let's run a pin down, let's run some kind of action to get him one-on-one or get him a shot. That's the guy you feel best about taking a jumper on this entire team from 15 feet and out is probably Mackenzie Mbako. He's got a sweet stroke, and he can hit him and knock him down, and he can make something happen. And if you've got him lodged on the bench because he's making defensive mistakes, I got news for you. Everybody was making defensive mistakes tonight. At some point, you're going to need somebody to spark your offense because your defense is not getting it. And defensively, they were all leaving shooters wide open. And so you can put that on Mbako because, well, he's a freshman and we need the other guys. But if you continue to bury him that way, he's never going to learn and he's never going to get better. And so in a game like this, that's a teachable opportunity to get him the chances to help you win.
Yeah. Andy, thoughts on that or other general thoughts on the offense?
I just think with Mbako, he doesn't look comfortable, but I'm not sure that yanking him is going to get him more comfortable. I think what a guy like that needs to be more comfortable is to score and see the ball go through the basket. We've seen this with the IU teams in the past. They play a lot harder on defense when they actually get into a rhythm offensively. Now, you may want it to be the other way around, and the defense dictates the offense and all of those things. But like I would say, generally over the scope of time that we've been doing the show, it's been the opposite. And I think you might get a more locked in Mbako on that end of the floor if you're able to really, see him get the ball, a little bit more. And it doesn't mean you got to go run every single play for the guy, but at least occasionally with a guy of that caliber, you've got to put him in positions to score, because I think the other shot he took was really kind of forced. There really wasn't anything going on.
It was a frustration shot. He wasn't getting anything going. He forced a turnover.
Yeah, first time he got it, he took a tough shot where there really wasn't a lot of spacing to take it. Yeah, now that you say what it was, I remember it. And even some of the plays that Ware made in the second half were tough turnaround shots in the post as well. And so, as you look at some of the things that, Woodson talks about offensively, more ball movement, more pick and rolls, it just didn't seem like the movements that they were doing when they would run stuff, like nobody was cutting hard enough to really generate any kind of advantage from what you were running, with the exception of that kind of zoom handoff they were running at the elbow that they've run for the, first couple, I think the first play of each of the last couple of games. They got a lob to Ware out of it tonight. I think X hit a jumper off of it the first time. Galloway scored off of it when they ran it again later in the game. It feels to me like this, and I know Coach was asking this in the Discord because he talks about kind of who's calling the offense. Is it X? Is it Woodson? I didn't really get a definitive idea. I know they showed the one, picture of X getting frustrated at the top of the key, because guys weren't getting in the right position. But I would also argue, like, if you got something that works, just keep running it a little bit, because there are variations of things they could do off of that action that were there. It didn't have to be the same thing every time. And if guys are getting confused or whatever the case may be, just I don't know. It just felt like there were ways to get him shots, and he responded when he got the ball in that position, because you gave a shooter a wide open shot.
Well, I think it's worth noting too that sometimes with a younger guy, if you get them going offensively, their defense gets better because it locks them in a little bit more to the game. I mean, we've seen that happen in the past, and it can work the other way too. If you lock down a defensive end, a guy can be more aggressive, willing to take a shot, willing to drive, all that stuff. But I mean, you can try and get one going. But here's the thing, guys, a week from tonight, they're playing UConn. Are you at all confident that they can hang with UConn? in a week.
Ryan, can we please focus on Wright State first?
But I'm just saying, that's what I mean though, is that us like pointing out these deficiencies despite a win, you've got to extrapolate to what this means against good teams who are not going to let them get away with what Army let them get away with. And letting a team hit 13 threes on you and you only answer with 4, you're going to lose a lot of basketball games when that's the case.
And look, something that we need to really point out and focus on here, and Andy, you just put it in our chat. I'm guessing this is from the post-game press conference. Mm-hmm. Xavier Johnson says IU needs to step up practice effort. We're not going as hard. I think our preparation led to this performance. I mean, look, a big part of what happened today, there are lots of schematic things and philosophical things that we've talked about. This team also just played really focused, careless, lackadaisical basketball. I mean, bottom line, you don't turn it over 18 times with, I just thought of 6 unforced turnovers. Gabe Cupps throws the ball at a guy's feet. Trey Galloway just gets it stripped out of his hand. There were just so many of those really bad turnovers that we haven't seen. Same thing, Andy. At the end of the game, you just leave a shooter because X and Khalil Ware can't figure out what's going to happen.
They're just not talking.
That happened a lot.
All game.
So no scheme is going to work with the kind of focus that Indiana brought tonight. But, when you have some of those schematic issues, especially defensively, Ryan, where, boy, it really feels like you've got to have everybody locked in, communicating well. You've really got to understand the scouting report. Who are we helping off of? Who are we not helping off of? All of those things. We saw none of it. And again, if this was just an opponent that was maybe like one of the 250 best teams in the country, they win this game. And credit to Army. I thought Army played really well for what they are. They, sensed blood in the water, and they went after it. They just didn't have enough. We out-talented and out-athletic them. And that's fine. We'll take our 8-point victory. But, this was a two-pronged thing that happened tonight, which is you saw some of Indiana's kind of schematic and philosophical things, come back to bite them, and they just didn't play focused.
No, absolutely.
And that, of all the things, and especially for X to say that, that's got to get fixed first. This team is going to have enough issues on the offensive end that, they can't also just be, trying to win games without max effort and focus. That's a bad early sign, and it needs to get fixed quickly.
And look, we've said all along, this will be a work in progress for a long time. Again, ton of young guys, ton of new players playing together for the first time. But I think we all expected better than tonight. I did not expect them to be this bad this early at this point. That said, the ceiling for this team in January and on is still very high. It's just, you've got to start to see it. And the philosophical stuff, you understand the mix-ups on defense and the communication issues and maybe some turnovers if you're passing the ball to where you think a guy's going to be and he's not there because you don't have the chemistry yet. You understand that stuff. What I don't understand is the schematic stuff that doesn't take advantage of what the defense is giving you and things like that. That we've seen for 3 seasons now and needs to develop and change. I'm not saying it can't, and I'm not saying Mike Woodson doesn't see it, but we've seen no movement in that direction. So I'm just puzzled as to when that ever comes, especially because we were told all offseason, this is going to be different. We had Trace Jackson-Davis. We had to do that. We had Jalen Hood-Schifino. We had to run pick and roll every time for those 2 guys because they were our 2 best offensive players, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just confused as to if and when that's ever going to change.
Yeah, I think it just becomes, to me, like some of that stuff boils down to the lineup stuff. And Woodson had a quote, about the starters. That whole unit has stunk the last 2 games in the first half. I got to figure it out. It does beg the question at some point, how long can you stick with playing this bigger lineup? The challenge is that 2 of the guys who've played best for you this season are Malik Renew and Khalil Ware. So to play smaller is to take one of those guys off the floor or not play Mbako. He has, for the last 2 games, when things got tough, opted for the latter of those options.
Let him be the offensive focus on the second unit until he gets going. Maybe that's an option.
Also, stop doing the hockey line changes. I know he's working on things right now, but you're putting that second unit out without a scorer. Put Ware or Renew with that second unit, or leave Ware or Renew in with that second unit so you at least have some momentum there.
Yeah, you're running stuff that's not you're running the same stuff with the second units. It's not getting you looks with the first unit that's more talented, and you can't be surprised that the results are pretty poor, and it results in guys, one of the shots they made was Caleb Banks taking a contested 3 in the corner. I mean, great that he made it, but the dude was just late shot clock stuff of trying to find guys, somebody who can manage to get open to take a shot, whether it was CJ Gunn or Gabe Cupps or whatever. But you're just running the same stuff that didn't work with less talented guys. I don't know what to tell you at that point. So I know, Jared, you said you wanted to talk Ware in the meaningful moment, so we'll leave that. I will say, in an attempt to kind of circle this around to something that has been better than what we expected as a tease for the next segment, it's been him 1,000%.
Yes.
And
the motor stuff, don't really see it. I mean, you see it times, but I think it's just because he's playing so many damn minutes. He looks a little kind of tired or a little slow here or there, and I think that's just the Ware having to, no pun intended, getting on him a little bit. I didn't mean that. I did not mean to say it that way.
Sure.
But
this night's been difficult enough, Ryan. We don't need to interject with
I'll
that
take
kind of
that
humor
one.
to
I'll
help
take
it.
it.
Okay.
I'll take that on the chin. You're right. But 9 of 11 from the field from him and 2 of 3 from the free throw line. I mean, he's doing everything you want. The only thing I can say is put him out on the floor more. I'd like to see him out on the floor and give him the confidence to shoot the ball, because that will make him unguardable. And then that two big man game actually makes sense if you put him out on the floor.
Yep. All right, well, hold that thought. We're going to talk more about him coming up. By the way, I do want to let everybody know, and you've probably seen this on social media already, but Tuesday is a big day for Indiana sports. It's being referred to as Indiana's largest day of NIL support. It's Hoosiers Connect, and they have organized basically a full day of content that is made to encourage all of us to go to inforindiana.com and donate. One of the big goals for Hoosiers Connect with this donation drive is to improve the number of, small recurring donations, because it's awesome to get the big donations from big businesses. But I mean, one of the strengths of Hoosier Nation is all of us, the 800 people who are here on a Sunday night listening to us talk about a very questionable performance against Army. This is what makes Hoosier Nation great. I've had the good fortune, good opportunity, along with Galen, to kind of be involved in planning this, and we're really excited for what you're going to see. A lot of great content. So mark your calendars for Tuesday. The schedule, I think, is out. I'm going to be sending out an email about it, and we'll tweet it out. But it's inforindiana.com. It's Indiana's largest day of NIL support. Be ready for that coming up on Tuesday. All right, guys, as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 72-64 victory over Iowa, we will point out today's meaningful moments you might have missed, and then go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Hey, this is Matt Spielfeld, Big Ten champ and better than advertised Sixth Man of the Year in 2016. And speaking of better than advertised, join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
All righty. Thank you, Max. We appreciate that. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. Coach isn't here. It's his birthday. Make sure you go wish him a happy birthday. We are breaking down Indiana's 8-point victory over Army. It's the top of segment 2, so you know what that means.
Meaningful moments that you might have missed.
Yes, this segment brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Ticket Project, where they help individuals and families experience IU athletic events in person for the first time through the generosity of alumni and fans. To learn more about how you can donate money or extra tickets to help create meaningful moments for other IU fans, visit HoosierTicketProject.org. That's HoosierTicketProject.org. And Andy, to the point that you were making there at the end of segment 1, Khalil and basically everybody else really got off to a slow start offensively in the first half. But just as Indiana did in the Florida Gulf Coast game, they really came out in the second half making a concerted effort. Like, look, our advantage is down low. Let's go down low, do what we need to do. Khalil Ware responds, going 7 for 7, from the field. And even though he's against Army and none of those guys are in his class physically, athletically, from a talent perspective, coming out in your second game in Assembly Hall when your team is trying to avoid disaster and going 7 for 7 is a big performance. And, there were a lot of plays that stood out, I thought. The one that I really liked seeing was the turnaround jumper that he had on the baseline. And I know it's kind of a point of contention, like, hey, we want to see, Ware, be a little tougher on the block, play through contact, all of that stuff. But I just wonder, with this Indiana team really struggling to find, like, what is our thing? When we need a shot, what is the shot we're going to get? Right now, you could do a whole heck of a lot worse than that little turnaround by Ware, which is unguardable and will be unguardable in most matchups just because of his size, ability to get it off. And so, again, I don't think that's something that you want to rely on. But in certain situations, that is something that you can count on, as at least a decent look that Indiana can get.
Jared loves a turnaround jumper from a big man. We've known that throughout.
This one a little bit more projectable forward, than the
a little bit
last
more,
one.
slightly.
So that stood out to me from him. But you're right. Just a terrific second half scoring for Khalil Ware, which. And Indiana needed, almost all those points. So anything else jump out to you from his performance tonight?
I mean, really just that whole stretch in general. He showed a little bit of everything. I think he scored 11 straight points. That was in the middle of it. I think that turnaround jumper, started it with a dunk, caught a lob in there, scored an and one. Thought he shot free throws relatively well over the course of the game. But he was really just dominant in that stretch and was able to take the ball in different positions and score. I thought when they can get him the ball at the free throw line, he's a good passer. The one that he tried to enter to renew from the 3-point line, not as much. But I mean, he was such a key cog of that part of the second half. They had a couple empty trips, 3 empty trips to start. Then they scored on, I think it was 9 straight possessions, scored 20 points in 9 possessions over that stretch. He's got 11 of those. Then, they turned it over 7 of the following 10 possessions, but let's not focus on that as much. But I do think he was, if you can allow him to find, enough space to really get the ball in there. As you said, that turnaround jump shot, he made another one that was shorter than the first one. But I thought generally his motor was good. I think there's rebounding things. I think it almost shows up more there. Yes. Some of the rebounding, and there was a ball he deflected where Hummel was like, that's great. He's got great length. You'd like to see him do the work earlier. He did, allow guys to drive by him at times and some of that. But I thought, that stretch was really key. Let IU gain some semblance of control of the game that they would soon relinquish, but they at least for that stretch really had Army on their heels, which is what you kind of would have expected for the entirety of the game or far longer stretches of the game. But, I think against a team like this, his, physical skills are pretty much unguardable against them if they can get him the ball in the right position.
And the other moment, Ryan, to transition to you to talk about Ware that folks may have missed, it happened early. I think Khalil was going for a rebound, and Mike Woodson didn't like kind of how hard he went after the rebound. And you saw him take Ware out, and he mouthed, "How many fouls do you have? How many fouls do you have?" Basically saying, like, you don't need to try and avoid fouls. Yeah. Go up physically, attack that rebound, which to me is a sign of Woodson just not going to allow Ware to have any slippage. If he sees it early in the game that he's not on it, he's going to stay on him. And I thought Ware responded really well to what Coach Woodson said to him.
No, he did, and I thought he played hard tonight. And honestly, Indiana's best play right now is lobbing the ball anywhere towards the rim when Ware has any space whatsoever and let him dunk it. I mean, that's essentially the best play Indiana is running now. It's whoever has the ball, if he has any room whatsoever, just put it. No one's going to get it over him. And so I've been really impressed with him from the exhibitions to now. I think he's been Indiana's consistent performer, maybe not their best player, but their most consistent performer. He's scoring points. He's using his length on defense. I think he overplays sometimes for a block, which we saw Trace Jackson Davis do for a few years. That's pretty natural for a younger guy to do who's a shot blocking artist, and it leaves your guy open on the backside if nobody helps down, which sometimes they can't. So it's not really their fault. It's kind of yours for being over aggressive. But other than that, I mean, the guy is everything you want him to be. He had a big steal late where he had a really big play where there was an open guy into the basket. He deflected it out of bounds to save a basket. Yep. He was plus 15. Teams, they were better when he was on the floor. And if you make your team better when you're on the floor, you're doing what you're supposed to do. And he's been the best player so far and most consistent performer. I'll continue to say that. And that's not an insignificant thing. No, not at all. Especially given
but I just want to point it out, for this young man especially. I know we said kind of earlier, you don't take a lot from it with the big guys like their production because they should be able to go get that points. But what you do take it from is in 4 straight, public appearances by this IU basketball team in matchups that haven't been that quote unquote exciting, where the players may not be juiced up coming into it as much as they would be for Purdue. Khalil's brought it every time and been productive. And I think given what we saw at Oregon, that is something meaningful to take out of these first 4 games.
It's huge for him. And his base level has been higher than everybody else's in these games. And you're not seeing the up and down. Like, Trey Galloway tonight, I thought he played with energy, but he scored 5 points for you in 30 minutes and didn't really do much on offense. He wasn't really affecting the game on offense. Until that lob late, you really didn't know he was around on the floor offensively very much. And so while Trey is a guy that has that energy and has all that stuff, his base level has not been as high as Khalil Ware's so far this season. And so, Khalil's done what he's supposed to do. And especially, as you said, given his reputation coming in, he is surpassing what was expected of him, especially early. And he and Renew really have been what Indiana has been able to rely on. And it's a shame that we're talking about that, because we're talking about we need to spread the offense out and do more. And maybe the 3-guard lineup is better, but you have to have those 2 guys on the floor when you need to win. The question is, do you pull one of them away from the hoop to give the other more space inside? I think at this point, given what we've seen, the answer is probably yes. If they're both on the floor at the same time, I don't think they should both be occupying the same space. That's me. I'm big into spacing on a basketball floor. I am
really going out on a limb there with that.
I am not a college basketball coach. Maybe that's just what we're doing these days. I don't know, but I do think that you need to open up the floor by moving one out onto the perimeter and then rotate them in, do something, run plays where they run off of each other. I don't know, but having them both double post just seems to be counterproductive.
Andy, the other moment, Ryan, are you good to hang around for a little while?
I got to take off, guys. I got NFL work to do, but game ball, Khalil Ware, hustle. We'll go Gabe Cupps.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks for being here, man.
I didn't know there was football on. I thought it was just the Jets and Raiders.
It is, and it's replay of the Heidi game 55 years later. Yeah. That's the only reason it's on.
Okay.
Will this one be more high scoring than that one was?
No,
it's not so far.
Not so far. Right. Later, guys.
All right. No one's enjoying sports today. Okay, well, except for IU soccer, because they're awesome. Congrats to IU soccer. They are awesome.
Double champs.
Andy, the other moment that really stood out to me, just as a symptom of a larger problem, was in the second half. Indiana's up 56-52. And I mean, you've got to have a stop at this point. 6 minutes to go. And again, this is an Army team that should not be able to harm us with dribble penetration. And yet, Barker just blows right by Xavier Johnson. And one of the things that I've loved most about Xavier Johnson is, he competes on almost every defensive possession. If he gets beat, he sprints and he's there. And he just kind of let the drive happen. Was slow to recover, committed a foul. And it was indicative of something that we saw a lot tonight, which was, him to a certain extent, not always, but more than you would like. And certainly Trey Galloway. And I mean, obviously, other guys like Malik and Anthony Walker and some of the guys that you wouldn't expect to be as good defending out on the perimeter, but just getting blown by. And that's part of the reason why Indiana was in rotation all the time, is they could not guard their yard. They could not stop ball handlers. I think Cupps probably did it as well as anybody. He certainly fights through screens as well as anybody. But, again, part of the formula for this team is, hey, you've got X and Trey out front. They're going to hound you. They're going to pest you. For the most part, they can keep guys in front. I know Trey has an issue with it in certain matchups. And I'll leave some space if, whatever X was dealing with when he went down, if that was still bothering him, okay, then maybe he wasn't able to move as well laterally. But still, in this game against this opponent, Indiana just and this does go back to some of the focus things, but Indiana just wasn't doing the most basic thing of guard your yard. Keep your man in front of you, make it hard for them to drive in, and that helps alleviate some of these issues with all the overhelp and all of that. And that most basic thing was not at all where it needed to be tonight.
Yeah, and there was a play in the first half that I wrote down where X really got blown by as well. So I don't think it was I don't know that it was unique to whatever, calf situation or whatever it was that happened to him.
I tend to agree with you.
In the second half. That did, to me, was not the first time. But the interesting thing to me about that is I think it just compounds the defensive philosophy. To the extent that that's an issue, it just compounds it, because the more you get blown by, the more guys are inclined to stay a little bit longer to cut off the drive. And a lot of times what would happen is, they're cutting, you got guys collapsing to stop it, and then the shooters are just relocating essentially behind them. And so when they go turn to recover, the guy is, as he shouldn't be, as should be the case, not where he was when you left him. And so the closeout becomes longer because you've stayed too late. They've relocated and you're trying to find your way to get out where you need to be. It just, I think for, we talked about it. Woodson talked about it. The effect that not having X had on the defense last year at the point of attack, and that was not a place that he was all that effective tonight. I think in spurts, yes, but consistently that was a problem. And really, you talk about so many times in these games, allowing another team to get comfortable. IU very much did that against Army in the entirety of the first half. And it really continued in the second half. Even when IU had that big scoring run, they let Army score enough during that stretch to not let the game get away from them. And so you had some of those stretches, and then you turn the ball over a bunch. And it's just, eventually you give up enough open threes, they're going to hit some of them. I thought the same thing. I thought Cupps did a fairly good job with that. Probably the best of anybody there. And I think that's what he's looking for from guys coming off the bench. Talked about wanting more from CJ Gunn and Caleb Banks and things like that. There was the play, this is another one, CJ Gunn kind of goes rogue. Post player turns his back. He runs at him trying to think he's going to pick his pocket and steal it. His guy gets a layup because nobody else can get there in time. He's so far past the play by the time he sees it. Nobody else can get there. Again, that's kind of a guard your yard. Do you trust the guy who's guarding the guy in the post? Maybe you're trying to make a play to spark everybody. But again, I think there's a certain level of trust, it feels like right now, which is probably reasonable for a group of guys who haven't played that well together. There is a certain trust deficiency, if you will, in terms of where people are supposed to be. And it accentuates the potential holes in the defensive philosophy at the same time.
One other one I want to point out, Andy, and then we'll get to yours. And I don't think anybody missed it, but I do just want to talk about it briefly. When it was 61-58, Trey Galloway probably could have taken a three, makes the extra pass to Gabe Cupps on the left corner. He drains a three, 64-58. A huge shot. Unfortunately, Army would go down, and the very next possession is the one where X and Ware left the shooter, and he drained the three. But, that shot from Cupps, I don't know what kind of percentage Cupps is going to shoot from three and how good of a shooter and scorer he's going to end up being at Indiana. And I think there may be plenty of threes that look ugly, like some of the ones he missed early. But we saw it against Florida Gulf Coast. We saw it in this one. I do think he's going to be a guy that is willing and able to step up and take and make big shots. It's just kind of been part of his DNA for as long as he's been a basketball player. And so that was encouraging to see again, because that was a huge shot for Indiana in that moment, only up three. And that pushed it out to 6 and was obviously very important. And Indiana ended it, eventually winning this game.
Yeah, that was a big shot. It was, you kind of see it once they kicked it out. I think it was Renew who had it first in the post. And they started to swing the ball around. You kind of saw it to Cupps. And I thought for a second, like you said, that Galloway wasn't going to shoot it. He kind of hesitated for a minute, then kicked it over. Yeah. And so, he stepped into that one confidently. Also hit another, I think one around the elbow in the second half that was a nice shot. So he's not going to be, it doesn't seem like a guy who's forcing a shot, but isn't necessarily going to be shy to shoot either. And so I think you're going to see him make some big shots over the course of his career. And, thought he certainly had some moments tonight.
Any meaningful moments for you that you want to point out that we haven't discussed yet?
I will say one, you kind of forget about most things in the first half, I feel like, in a game like this, but there was a play, I guess it wasn't super late in the half, but I thought X really did a lot of good things to end the first half. For as much as we talked about some of the things defensively, in the one that I wanted to note was, Ware misses one. I think it was a jumper. X comes flying in from the baseline, gets fouled on the putback, able to make the free throw, made a three, a couple possessions later, made a couple other free throws. So he played really well down the stretch of the first half and really was the only guy who scored more than 4 points in the first half. He had 15. And so I thought for as much as the offense kind of struggled in that half. I thought he made some big plays. It's kind of what you would expect from a leader, but you wouldn't necessarily expect him crashing the glass the way that he was. And that was really a big play to kind of, continue to give IU a little bit of momentum in that scenario. So I thought he did some really good things, was active, a little bit out of control at times with some turnovers, but generally speaking, took good shots in the first half. And thought that was a good effort play that, maybe it's something he was trying to get everybody else going. Who knows? But thought he had a good first half for as much as we critiqued his defense a minute ago.
Agree. No, absolutely. I mean, Indiana wasn't getting anything going. I mean, those 15 points and 3 assists. I mean, that was almost Indiana's entire output in the first half. So, certainly his performance, like everybody's, left some room for improvement, but he was about as effective as anybody else, which was nice to see. All right, Andy, time to go inside the numbers, brought to you by Jackson Hewitt Tax Services. If you live in Bloomington or the surrounding areas and you want your taxes done right, contact our friend and Chat Mob Hall of Famer Megan Mahaffey and her team in Bloomington, Bedford, and Martinsville by calling 812-339-3334 or by visiting jacksonhewitt.com. Just word to the wise, though. Maybe if Indiana has a bad performance, give it like 24 hours and then call Megan. You may not want to call her right after Indiana plays poorly. A few key stats, Andy. In a game like this against Army, you don't want to look at free throws as deciding the game. And yet, Indiana goes 18 for 22, which is terrific. I mean, that's 81.8%. X is 9 for 9. Outside of the 2 that Trey clanged late, Indiana did a nice job hitting them late to be able to seal the game. And Army goes 3 for 9, which I don't know what they're shooting on the season, but I'm sure it's not that poor. And so, I mean, if they just make a couple more free throws and we miss a couple, which would have been perfectly reasonable, this is an even closer game. And I just think that highlights how close Indiana skated to disaster here, And so, again, if you're wondering why the tone of the show isn't quite as happy as maybe after the win over Florida Gulf Coast, I would first ask if you watched the game. And secondly, I would say that because it's hard to translate a lot of the things that Indiana did to win here, to what's going to happen moving forward. And so, I mean, look, 18 turnovers, all the offensive rebounds Indiana gave up. The other thing that we have to talk about a little more, I guess, is the 3-point shooting. Do you want to hit that? I know you had a note in our chat that was quite illustrative of the issues Indiana's facing here early in the season.
Yeah, I will say just on the free throws, Malik stepped up and hit some big ones down the stretch. He had missed I think he missed one in the first half, but was, I think, 4 for 4 down the stretch. Another part of an impressive performance from him that we haven't talked about, just from an all-around game. 14 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Tied Xavier Johnson for the lead in
3
assists
blocks
tonight. So, an overall good performance from him. Glad to see him be able to step up and make those down the stretch. And they're 18 and 20 before Trey missed those others. But credit to Ryan Carrazza of Inside the Hall for this. Hoosiers have allowed 72 3-point attempts in their first 2 outings. Florida Gulf Coast and Army made 26 combined. IU, on the other hand, has only taken 24 of its own across the 2 contests. Vast 3-point volume discrepancy continuing so far again this season under Woodson. I mean, that is alarming at best to look at that. And
yeah, we're sounding the alarm now.
And I mean, even if you look, IU shot just 3 in the second half, and I think outside of the Cupps one, I believe the other 2 were both late shot clock scenarios. They were not necessarily, in the true flow of the offense. So I think that's one where, everybody that you play isn't going to be as hell bent on shooting threes as Army was, and this was even extreme for what they've done so far on the season. But that can be an equalizer in a game like this when the talent discrepancy is wide. It makes complete sense for a team to do that, to kind of throw the variance in there of that, and knowing that IU is not going to do that. But I mean, you look in the game, IU got to the free throw line a lot more, but some of this speaks to offensive rebounding. IU had 43 field goal attempts for the game, and Army shot 38 threes. And so I think that's probably the other stat as we get to the 3 points, and obviously you can feel free to touch on that. Offensive rebounding again, gave up 11 offensive rebounds, 14 second chance points, outscored 14-5 in second chance points. At some point we can't just pin it on Well, teams are taking a lot of threes, a lot of long rebounds, a lot of things like that. There were plenty of rebounds that were right around the basket. Didn't really have the team rebounds tonight where the ball, at least didn't feel that way. I guess there were 4, balls getting blocked out of bounds and things like that. Seems like it's going to continue to be a struggle for this team. And I think one that, given the overall size and athleticism of the team, seems like something that would be solved this year. And just to circle back to 3-point shooting, like, we can point back to the couple that they're draining, falling out of bounds in the corner as the shot clock expires. They also missed a ton of wide open ones. Yes. That stuff evens itself out at some point. It isn't just bad luck that you're giving up those others. It's probably, in fact, good luck that they're missing some of the other wide open ones that they got. And against better teams, yeah, sure, nobody's going to shoot 50% from 3. You give up enough good, wide open, clean looks to a good team, you're going to find yourself down significantly. So anyway, that was a lengthy answer, but did circle back to the 3-point shooting for you. Just if you want to
Andy,
pick up on anything.
We shot better percentage-wise. We shot 36.4% from the 3-point range with our 4 for 11. Oh. They were 34.2%, which is why the percentage can be such a meaningless stat at times when the volume is this different. I mean, Andy, Army, again, let me underscore this, the 338th ranked team in KenPom entering this. They will go up because of this performance in the computer rankings, and they should. Army had 61 field goal attempts. We had 43 at home. I mean, one of the most basic things you should do against an opponent you should dominate is dominate shot volume, which is one of the most underrated stats. John Gassaway talks about this all the time. And what dictates shot volume? Turnovers, rebounds, a lot of times. How good are you at protecting a possession so that you can actually get a shot out of it? And how good are you at limiting opponent possessions so they have fewer opportunities to shoot? I mean, if Indiana is going to be down 18 in terms of shot volume, now again, you can make up for that with free throws, and Indiana did that, so that's part of making up for it. But that is horrible. Yeah. I mean, that's an absolutely terrible statistic in a game like this. And again, goes back to, as much as it was scheme and philosophy and all of that, this was also just a team that just kind of came to play in spurts, but didn't come to compete for 40 minutes. With the kind of competitive focus you need. And that's the problem, is you can't let that be a habit. That's something that needs to be more consistent than it's been. Like, all right, you're up by, 35 points with 30 minutes left and you take your foot off the gas in the final 10 minutes, whatever. Like, I don't care about that. But to come out and play like this for 40 minutes, it's not good. I mean, the other thing, Andy, what do we always talk about just when it comes to effort, right? Blocks and steals. A lot of times that's, going and playing hard. Indiana had 10 total. Army had 12. A team like Army should never be able to do that. And Indiana let them do that. And so those are the things that look, we've been talking about the 3-point shooting on this show for a long time. So I'm obviously concerned about that. But the competitive spirit of this team has to be better. It just was not good enough tonight. It was good enough to eke out a win. But there's a lot of questions in that area, and you can see it. You can't always see that stuff in the stats. Tonight, you can see it all through the stats.
Yeah, 100%. I think you talked about those block and steal numbers. IU had 5 of each. Army had 12 steals, out of IU's 18 turnovers. And you look down the stat sheet, everybody who played in the game except Anthony Walker had at least 1 turnover. That to me is telling. It's not just one guy being loose with the ball. It's not just one guy making bad passes or bad decisions or being lackadaisical with things. Like, it's everybody.
Yep.
And that, again, 12 steals for Army, and that's not really what they're really trying to do. They were not pressing. They're not.
6 of those were just thrown right to them.
Yeah, I mean,
it's almost not really right calling it a steal. It was a gift.
Yeah, it was, and they would do some post doubles from time to time. Those were not overly effective. I didn't really feel like, but against a team that's not trapping or pressing, 12 steals is pretty hard to fathom as you look at it that way. And like you said, that's really where some of the effort comes in. And yeah, so you give they were +6 in turnovers, 18 versus 12. They were +6 on the glass, on the offensive glass, and they were if you look at the points off of those, points off turnovers, they ended up only with 2 more points off turnovers than IU, but they ended up with 9 more second chance points. And And for all that IU wanted to do going inside, it was 36-20 points in the paint. I mean, you give 20 points in the paint to a team that shot 38 threes. So, again, it kind of speaks to defense. I think the other thing that I'd point out at a team level is 4 fast break points. And Woodson alluded to this a little bit in the post game. I'm trying to find it. I was pasting a bunch of these quotes in here. We can't just play in the half court this season. Thank you. I want to play faster. I want to play faster. Transition continues to be a point of emphasis. This is not what he said, because I want to play faster. Really, really didn't get, I think it was single digit fast break points against Florida Gulf Coast, 4 in this game tonight. And for a team that is struggling a ton in the half court, to get some easy baskets like the one they got late, which was a little bit of a scramble situation with the deflection and the run out and the lob to Ware, this team has to try to find ways to get easy baskets, but they're not defending well enough to create, turnovers and steals that are going to lead to those runouts. And they're not getting rebounds well enough to even push the ball up the floor after those kinds of things. And it's little things like that that can help paper over some of the, offensive philosophy things or whatever you want to call it. But through 2 games, they really weren't able to do that in any meaningful way. And I think that's concerning, because what we've seen of the half-court offense so far is that if it falls back on relying on IU to score a ton of points efficiently in the half-court, it's going to be ugly at times.
Well, and the other thing about playing fast with that first unit, Mbako, Renew, and Ware they have some good athletic traits. Neither one of them is a burner that seems especially comfortable playing in the open court. Especially, Renew's not a finisher in the fast break. Ware has good athleticism, but foot speed is probably the thing he lacks the most. And so that's part of the issue too, is you get X and Trey going so fast. Then there was actually a play, I think it was in the second half, late. X pushed it really fast, but he got up there before everybody. And so he stops, and to his credit was, patient. And I think he found Renew, dumped it down for a little bucket, but that's the other issue with that group. So look,
yeah, well, one of the turnovers kind of the same was trying to play fast and giving it to Renew as like a trailer. As he comes barreling down the wing in one of those stretches, nothing good is going to happen in that scenario, because the defense has pretty much gotten back and set at that stage. Like, he's not going to, that's just not a good position to put him in. That's not his fault. It's just a matter of being able to do some of that. So I don't know if that's the thing that prompts some of the lineup changes or the things like that. I think the other thing that gets hard is you talk about wanting to run more pick and roll. You just don't, they haven't done anything with Mbako in that scenario. I don't know whether he can or can't be the ball handler in that scenario, but he certainly hasn't been afforded the opportunity so far. And so you get into that. You've got X who wants to make plays off that. Trey can at times. But to come out and say after the game, well, we need to do more, get more pick and rolls going. I don't know. Do you have the personnel? Are you playing? I think you have the personnel to do that. Are you playing the combinations of players that maximize the effectiveness of that is ultimately the question.
Yep. All right, Andy. Coming up here on the assembly call, we hand out our Game Balls and Hoosier Hustle Award. We'll discuss a lingering question or 7 and look ahead to Indiana's upcoming battle against Wright State. That is next here on the assembly call. Stick with us.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thank you, Jordan. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms. Ryan had to bounce off to do his big lead work for tonight, with it being an NFL Sunday. So it's just Andy and I to take it down the stretch here. It is time now for our Game Balls, presented by our friends at Allie and James at Bloom Environmental. And as we enter the colder months and begin to stay indoors a bit more, Allie and James want to make sure that everyone knows about radon, a colorless, odorless, radioactive gas that is the leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. It enters buildings through cracks and gaps in the foundation and through service pipes of homes. You can contact Bloom Environmental today, mention Assembly Call, and get a free radon test kit and mitigation estimate. Learn more at bloomenviro.com. That's bloomenviro.com. All right, Andy, I will go to you for your game ball choice first.
Got to be Khalil Ware. We talked about that dominant stretch he had in the second half, and I thought that was really turned it on, particularly in the second half when IU needed someone to step up. Overall for the second half, he had 16 points, 7 of 7 from the floor in that half, and added 3 rebounds. So maybe we'd love to see a few more rebounds on the box score for him. But 20 and 6 for him, led the team in plus minus. I thought he was the difference in the game.
Yeah, I think Ware's a fine choice. Ryan picked him. I saw Coach in the chat said Ware too. I'm not going to argue. I will throw in a vote for Xavier Johnson, simply because as up and down as his performance was, at the end of the day, from your senior, you've got to have production. And his offense saved Indiana in the first half. He finishes with 19 points, 5 assists, a block and a steal. His 9 of 9 from the free throw line was huge. So lots of room for improvement for everybody. But certainly those two guys, just from a production standpoint, really stepped up on a night when Indiana needed it, because they didn't get anything from anybody else. I mean, Ware had 20, Johnson had 19, Renew had 14, and then you had a couple of guys with 5. So for anybody who was looking for the bench to be able to kind of explode and get some rhythm going offensively, that did not happen. Hold that thought. We'll probably talk about that in lingering questions. All right, and that moves us now to the Hoosier Hustle Award.
The Hoosier Real Hustle Award.
Hi, this is Anthony Leo, and it's time for the Hoosier Hustle Award. But first, I have some exciting news to share about our friends at Evansville Security Services. They've been acquired. They are now part of the team at Security Pro 24/7, which provides trusted and reliable security for your event or business, from Bloomington, my hometown, to Evansville, where Coach Calvert Chaney grew up, and everything in between. Just like hustle can't be measured by stats, prevention can't be measured either, but it has a huge impact on your bottom line and peace of mind. So let the security pros at Security Pro 24/7 help you prevent a bad outcome today. Visit securitypro247.com to learn more. That's securitypro247.com. And tell them Anthony Leo sent you.
Thank you, Anthony. Andy, Hoosier Hustle Award. Ryan already gave his to Gabe Cupps.
At the risk of agreeing with Ryan again, which is always a little easier to do, and he's not here, I'm going to go with Gabe Cupps as well. We talked about his on-ball defense. I think that was, the way he defended there stood out. Felt like he, played really hard on that end, and made some solid defensive plays. Quite honestly, this one was a hard one for me tonight. I won't say that people didn't play hard, but a drumbeat of the show has been overall effort and focus. And I think it becomes hard to figure out in a game like that, the Hoosier Hustle Award in that, given that. So I'll throw it to Cupps, but would probably be open to other choices. Don't think it's a game where nobody gets it, but it is a little tricky in a game like this.
No, I mean, there was a severe lack of competitive focus. Like, I think guys were trying to move fast and running up and down the court and breaking a sweat. It's not that guys weren't playing with effort. They just weren't playing with focused effort, and that's the big problem. So I'm going to give it to Cupps too, because I thought when he was on the court, the defensive intensity seemed to be better. Now, Gabe had plenty of problems in this performance. I mean, some of his decisions on offense, some of the passes were very poor. And so certainly the most kind of uneven performance that we've seen from him, but that, went for the entire team. I would say Peyton Sparks, for the short period that he was in there, played hard, gave some hustle, and some toughness for Indiana. He had 4 rebounds in 9 minutes. We talked with Jay on Thursday about, Peyton Sparks' rebounds for the season, 5.5. He also had one that just went off his hands, or that would have been 5, but he had a couple strong rebounds in there. And that, to me, is the thesis for why you're going to see Peyton Sparks play minutes, because he does some things that this team is going to need on certain nights. And so I thought his, minutes were, he did some good things while he was out there. But I'm going to give it to Cupps, and I just thought his consistent effort fighting through screens was nice to see. There are too many times where Indiana just kind of gave up when they got screened. There was one play in particular where Mackenzie Mbako goes under a screen. I cannot imagine that was the plan because it was against the little guy who was making all the threes. Now, maybe there was supposed to be a switch or something, but it just kind of looked like Mackenzie chilling back there, not fighting through the screen and waiting and hoping the guy missed. And on that particular moment, actually, I don't even remember if he missed or made the shot. It doesn't matter. It's all about the process.
I'm pretty sure he made it. If I'm remembering the play that he did.
He probably did. And so that's the thing with Gabe that you always see is certainly through 2 games, he doesn't take a possession off defensively. And that's good to see because at least from a mental and focus standpoint, Indiana took a lot of possessions off defensively and didn't do a good job guarding the yard, as we said. Gabe, of everybody, probably did the best. So he wins it. Ware wins it. Let's talk lingering questions. Chat mob, if you want to put some ideas in here, you can. Andy, we talked in segment 1 about Mackenzie Mbako and, not getting him going. And I know, look, there's probably going to be some debate about that because some people are saying, well, he's not playing hard enough defensively to get going. We're looking at it more from the standpoint of, okay, but this is one of your most talented offensive players. You've got to find ways to get him going. I definitely stand by that. But just from an overall perspective, when you look at the offense, I think now, especially if Woodson is going to do some of these line changes that it seems like we're kind of going back to from season 1, that second unit's got to have some scoring in it. When you've got what it ends up being Gabe, Walker, Banks, Sparks, Gunn. Now, look, you'd want it to be a guy like CJ Gunn, obviously, but he hasn't gotten himself going. What Banks hit a nice 3, but also was just wildly out of control on a drive. What is Indiana going to do to A, maybe get a little bit more balanced starting lineup, and B, get more scoring off the bench? That to me is a big lingering question because the starting lineup I'm not saying that you give up on the starting lineup because the ceiling is that group figuring it out. But here early, maybe you do need to do something to jumpstart certain guys and just make sure it's more balanced because this team isn't good enough offensively to have possessions without a go-to scorer on the court, And again, maybe that's the way to get Mackenzie Mbako going, even though I'm sure it wasn't in, kind of his plans to be a guy who comes off the bench and anchors a second unit, whatever. But that's coaching. You got to get guys to buy into roles. So I don't have an answer. I just think it's clearly one of the biggest lingering questions going into the Wright State game.
Yeah, I think it's a compelling question to try to figure out what, is that a way to get him going? I think where my mind immediately goes to is then, okay, so if there's kind of 2 paths to take here. If you are committed to playing this whole 5-man second unit, kind of suggests you probably can't move Cupps into the starting lineup because then who's your ball handler with the second group? Kind of suggests you can't really move CJ Gunn into that group because otherwise you'd be essentially playing Mbako or Caleb Banks at the 2 with the second unit. And so who is the guy that you'd put there? And then you put Anthony Walker out there, who's really kind of a non-shooter. Like, can you get a non-shooter with that? Like maybe Caleb Banks is a guy you'd throw out there, but Woodson is kind of consistently harped on, I would need to get more out of Gunn, Banks, and Mbako. So I think it becomes hard to move around if you want to stick to playing these 5-man groups. I think it would be very easy to do that if you didn't want to go that route. So to me, that's the decision, the key decision point for Woodson is, am I committed to playing these 5-man units? And if so, I just have a hard time figuring out, like, Banks feels to me like the guy that you'd put into the starting lineup. And given some of the things he says about him, wanting to get more effort, wanting to get more whatever, like, feels like an odd choice, but I don't know. So that's where the part gets hard. And it's like we sit here and talk in the offseason about, what's the depth? This depth is going to be so good. And then you're trying to figure out how the pieces fit together, which was another offseason question. And so far, they don't fit together real well. And as you're trying to figure out what if you can pare down that rotation a little bit, like maybe you've got some other options, but as long as he stays committed to playing the 5-man second unit, somebody has to step up at that other spot to start, or you're really accentuating some of the challenges that Mbako's already having. If you think that the right thing to do is to find time for him at the 4, how do you actually do that? So that's where it gets tricky.
I mean, you're right. I mean, everything that you just laid out is absolutely right, because that's the thing. There's no one playing well enough or that really projects to be that guy. CJ Gunn kind of would be the idealized version of him that we talked about in the offseason, but he just hasn't been able to get it going, and CJ and McKenzie are guys that need to score when they're on the court, and we haven't been able to get that from them yet. And so something's going to have to be unlocked there. For the other lingering question, hey, we'll go to Coach Tonsoni, who we appreciate, Coach, you spending this evening of your birthday with us talking through this. I hope it's more enjoyable there in the chat mob than it is trying to find answers to questions here. But this is an interesting one, Andy. Do you think this team is connected? Bad body language, or body language was off tonight. I mean, I think there's only one way to answer this question right now, and it's a very difficult question to answer, because to truly know this, you got to be there in practice, you got to be there in the locker room, all that stuff. We get this little 2-hour snippet to watch. I would say this doesn't look like a team that's very connected. On the one hand, and there's two parts of that. On the one hand, I didn't expect this team to look connected from an offensive or defensive cohesion standpoint. Like we got to remind ourselves that there is a part of what happened tonight that was expected and somewhat explainable, a small part, but there's some other things. I mean, again, just seeing some of the possessions, seeing some of the, like Coach was saying, the body language seemed off. That is a bit of a concern. Again, not sound the alarm, but it is something to watch, against Wright State. You would think, after kind of having this near disaster against Army, that they would really come out with their hair on fire, playing together, playing hard as a group, or playing more focused as a group against Wright State. And that's a pretty basic thing to kind of look for from a team, but that's certainly going to be the thing that we're all looking for against Wright State. So do I think the team is connected? Certainly in some of the basketball ways, they're probably a little bit less connected than we were hoping. And I think that's fair to say. And just in terms of, how they are individually and interpersonally, it's tough to say too much, but, and there wasn't a lot to get excited about to see some of that enthusiasm in this game, but it certainly leaves you wanting more. And maybe you'll see some of that as the play starts to improve. Sometimes those things build off each other, but yeah, it's not what you'd like to see on November 12th, I don't think, despite the 2-0 record.
Yeah, I think that is, like you said, probably not ultimately super surprising given the number of new faces that you have, and even with the guys that you do have back, in large part being asked to take on different roles maybe than what they did before. So in some regard, probably is to be expected. I think the challenge becomes that connectedness seemed to manifest itself with poor communication on the defensive end when this team is supposed to be good, and with not really a lot of cohesion offensively in terms of being able to get guys in the ball in spots that can be successful, cutting with purpose, moving with purpose. And so I think that can come over time, but I felt like there was a lot of things that we saw even in the Florida Gulf Coast game. I'll go back a little bit to the Mbako thing, thought he seemed still really connected with the game, was excited on the bench. Everybody still seemed kind of into that game in a way that tonight that didn't seem to be the case. Now, I think there's a part of it where you played poorly enough, they hung around long enough that the thought of, oh crap, we might actually lose this game creeps into your mind. And I think that is inherently going to impact your body language in a negative way, but it seemed like in spite of the fact they weren't playing as well against Florida Gulf Coast, like that wasn't an issue, but it was tonight. Or at least it seemed like it tonight watching it on TV again. I'm sure somebody who was there may have a different feel for that, but at least what you saw on TV, it was a lot of guys seeming like kind of sulking a little bit about this is not going well, understanding it's not going well, but not really doing the things in long stretches that are going to pull you out of it when it's not going very well. And then, like I said, I think it kind of turned into the, oh crap, we can't lose this game type of thing, which is not ideal. And we talk about looking ahead a little bit to the UConn game and things like that. I also think guys will get up for that game and provide a level of energy in that game that is far different than what we've seen so far. You don't want that to be the case, but I think inherently it's human nature. And I think it's also human nature for a group of guys who, may not have a lot of that built-in success and that historical success as a unit that is going to give you that, but that environment is going to bring that out of some guys. So now that may not mean a damn thing when it, when it comes around to it, but I also don't think you'll see some of that in that scenario just based on who you're playing.
Yeah. Indiana opened the season 50th in Ken Palm, which was very low, given what we kind of expected from this season. Indiana is now 62nd after 2 straight games of playing below expectations. And now, Indiana plays Wright State. Wright State is currently number 165, at least in Ken Palm. They got blasted by Colorado State in their first game, 105-77. They play Toledo on Tuesday, and then they play Toledo at home, and then Indiana on Thursday. So potential for that team to be a little tired, especially if that Toledo game is competitive, which you would expect it to be based on their rankings. But tell me a little bit about Wright State, at least what you know of them, and what Indiana fans should expect on Thursday.
Yeah, I think the two key players are Trey Calvin, who's a guard. He had 33 in their opener, but was one of the Horizon League's best players a year ago. And then Tanner Holden, who played really well for them, transferred to Ohio State for last season and then transferred back this year. So he was the second leading scorer in that game. Those are really the two guys that I think focus on most offensively. Calvin is their 6-foot point guard or 6-foot guard rather. So again, can you keep him in front of you? The whole guard your yard thing becomes pretty important in that scenario. I will say one thing that may bode well for IU. They allowed Colorado State to shoot 81% from 2-point range, which is where IU clearly wants to play.
That's where we like to operate.
So you got that going for you. And so, who knows? But that was an area they really struggled in the opener. So that should be one of the better teams in the Horizon League, I would say. And in general, they've kind of been that way over the last handful of seasons. So have a coaching system that's been in place for a while. So will not be an easy team. Didn't seem like they played a ton of guys. It seemed like they played their starters pretty heavy minutes against Colorado State, despite losing by so much. So that'll be interesting. But they shot 40% from 3 in their opener, didn't shoot a ton of them. Perhaps that changes as they look ahead to IU, but they did shoot 40% on somewhat limited attempts there. But haven't seen them play this year. Did not watch that game. Maybe good that they've got a fairly quick turnaround from playing a Toledo team that should be pretty decent in the MAC. But again, the game you need to win, get some momentum, hopefully come out with a little bit different level of focus and energy in that one against what should be a better team than what they faced arguably in either of the first 2 games, although I think they probably end up pretty comparable to Florida Gulf Coast when it's all said and done.
Indiana currently number 1 in the country in free throw defense, as Florida Gulf Coast and Army have shot a combined 33% from the free throw line. So these scores could have been even closer, I guess, is the point. Although neither team shot a lot of free throws. But Andy, this needs to get better, and it needs to get better fast because, look, it's better to be 2-0, obviously, than some of these other teams that have taken a loss, and that's all well and good, and Indiana has avoided disaster, and hopefully they can do that against Wright State. But you start playing Connecticut and Maryland and Michigan and Auburn and Kansas, which are 5 of the next 7 games, and performances like tonight are going to get you run out of the gym. And that is why we are kind of striking the tone that we are, despite Indiana winning by 8. It's because, look, the coach that everyone was honoring on the bench tonight with the red sweaters, his whole thing was always play against your potential. You're not playing against the opponent. You're playing against the game of basketball and how well you can play it. This Indiana team certainly can. They have the players to play it better than they did tonight, but we did not see that on the court, and we have to, or the losses are going to start piling up quick. And we can take on some water in the non-conference. We can't take on that much and still expect to get where we want to go.
The league is not really setting the world on fire in general, no. So that doesn't help either.
No, it's not. All right, you're listening to the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. Always remember to check out our friends at Home Field Apparel. Use the promo code HOME23 at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Andy, it's time for last call. Your final thoughts on an 8-point victory for the Hoosiers that didn't really feel like it.
Lots of work to do for sure. I joked with you guys before the game that I thought because the Eagles weren't playing, I could have a low stress Sunday from a sports perspective. That proved, unfortunately, not to be the case. I think, kind of like we've talked about on here, there is nobody who could have rationally looked at this team and said there will not be growing pains and there won't be challenges. I think the fear and the reason, as you said, we've kind of struck the tone, is that I don't think anybody thought it would look at any point like it did tonight. And to a certain extent, even segments of the first game. And so I think what you have seen, especially with a guy like Khalil Ware, is like the talent undeniably is still there with this roster. Xavier Johnson said something to that effect. I think, we'll see over time. This is a really talented team. I don't have any doubt about that. But this team has to figure out how to use that talent within the framework of what Woodson is asking them to do on both ends of the floor. And right now, that's where the disconnect is. And that can be figured out, papered over, whatever you want to say, in games against lesser competition. And that's kind of been the case so far in these first two games. And so this will really be a test for how much does that philosophy change, or how much is he able to impart that philosophy on this group of players. If neither of those things happen, this is not going to be a very fun season, I think, in the long run. And I don't think it's time. I think if you put yourself in the shoes of the coach 2 games in, it is not the time to pull the ripcord and move completely away from what you believe in. But I think at some point, if a few games after this, we look and we're having the same conversations about this team is not able to execute what he wants to do effectively, it then becomes incumbent to make some changes to figure out how to get the most out of the guys that you have. So that's where I'm not hitting the panic button after 2 games. But I do think that's going to be the fork in the road that's going to come for this team, is either they're going to be able to figure out how to play the way he wants them to play, or he's going to have to figure out a different way to play if they want to be successful. And so far, he's pushed buttons in the games with lineup decisions and guys who have played that shows he understands the importance of winning the games and not hurting people's feelings and not doing those kinds of things. But at some point, those are going to be harder and harder decisions as you go forward and trying to figure out how much can you deviate from the way that you want to play on one or both ends of the floor to be able to make your team successful. And so that's what we don't know yet. The good thing is they've made it through these games while winning, while displaying some of the things that can allow you to be excited about this team, but also showing some of the flaws that we all knew were there and maybe were a little bit bigger than we thought. And so we'll figure it out. It's a journey. We're 2 games in, and so far I don't think we like where it's headed, but also not a reason to turn back and start over either.
Yep, 2-0 is 2-0. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to win games, and Indiana's won 2 of them, and that is good. And there's something to be said for, not letting one of these really bad performances, end up getting you clipped with a loss. And so that's good. And, the last thing that I'll focus on tonight, and we've pointed out, I think, all the issues and the lingering questions and all of that. I think the best thing to take out of these first 2 games is the performance of Khalil Ware. And he's stepped up when Indiana has needed him to. He's done a pretty good job on the glass. He's shown us that he can provide some of the rim protection that we lost, obviously, with Trace Jackson-Davis being gone. His block percentage right now is 9.4%. That might be almost exactly what Trace's was last year, if I remember correctly. And so seeing that is good. But Indiana's going to have to get more, obviously, out of the starting unit and out of everybody, and just find ways to play more cohesive offense more consistently, and figure out on defense how to communicate with each other and how to figure out how to stop having so many of these miscommunications. But seeing what Khalil can do and watching him thrive so far in kind of a go-to role that, when Indiana really needs something, they go to Khalil, and they go to Malik. And those guys in the second halves of these games have stepped up, and they deserve credit for that. But them and the rest of their teammates need to start playing a lot better, because the competition is going to get better real soon, real fast. And based on what we've seen through 2 games, this team isn't ready for that kind of schedule. They've got time to get there. They certainly have the talent, the length, and the athleticism to be able to compete against that kind of schedule. But they have to figure out how to play better basketball, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. And right now, through 2 games, this team just isn't playing very good basketball, even though they've won 2 games. And that's what we want to see improve Thursday against Wright State. All right, that'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And don't forget to go to substack.assemblycall.com to join our free email newsletter. Special thank you to Bob Thompson for the music you hear on the show. Special thank you to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logo. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Thursday. Until then.
Take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Here I come, Mrs. Stansoni.
It's your birthday.
There we are.
All right.
All right. I
want to go.
On that note,
I want a beer.
On that note, I'm going to go.
What's the Luca quote? I need a recovery beer. That's what I need. I need a recovery beer, Luca.
Yeah, maybe
all
a
right.
couple. So, all
right.
Sounds
See you, everybody.
Talk to you later.
See you, man.